Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining me and my very special guest. She is one of the greatest actresses of her generation. She is also a two-time Tony Award winner for her electrifying performances in The Heiress and Doubt, and won 2 Emmy Awards for her work on 24 and The Handmaid's Tale. And she is nominated once again for an Emmy Award for playing media matriarch Nan Pierce on the hit HBO series Succession. Please say hello to my friend, joining us from Switzerland, Cherry Jones.
Yodel, yodelay.
This is
Good
wonderful.
Abend.
I love it. Good Abend. Cherry, how are you and where are you?
I am in my wife's hometown of Bern, Switzerland. She needed to come to Switzerland, and so we are here. And we're here for a good little bit of family time, which is wonderful. And I love her family. And it was her birthday yesterday, so the family all gathered, and we had a social distanced dinner outside, and it was wonderful.
So when did you get there? Because, you know, the New York theater and the world shut down around March 12th. Were you here first before you went to Switzerland?
This is the trajectory. I had hurt my knee and was having a hell of a time getting up and down my stairs up to my apartment in New York. And my sister kept saying, I heard it in February, my sister kept saying, come home to Tennessee. It's flat, the house is flat, it's handicapped, you know, there are bars in the showers and all of that. And so Sophie and I had been thinking about it. And honestly, the day Broadway closed, we looked at each other and we said, if we're going to go, we should go now. Because I knew I was going to be of no use to Sophie, and because I had to put on a helmet to go down the stairs. I was so terrified of those stairs with my knee. So we drove to Tennessee and quarantined in Tennessee for 2 weeks at my sister's. And we spent almost 4 months there, basically me sitting on the back porch, watching spring come and then summer come and making a lot of potholders and listening to too many podcasts and reading a lot of news. And then by the time we were needed in Switzerland, we booked our flights. And then Governor Cuomo wisely made his quarantine list. And unfortunately, Tennessee had become, the COVID rates had started to skyrocket in Tennessee. So we drove back to New York and quarantined for 14 days in New York. And then 2 days later, we flew to Switzerland, where we quarantined for 10 days. It's 10 days in Switzerland. And we've been out of quarantine for a couple of weeks now. But we've just leapfrogged from one quarantine to the next, but to family, you know. So it's been worth every 14 days of being at home.
What's the pandemic like in Switzerland? How different is it there as opposed to here in the States?
Well, it had been, it had begun like 3 weeks before New York, and it had gone very quickly. And there were, I forget how many deaths there were in Switzerland, but they shut everything down. They didn't mandate masks for the longest time, which was interesting. But they've gotten very low now, but they're starting to creep back up because people are behaving as though there's not still this wretched virus running around. So just in the last couple of days, it's really taking a spike up. Sophie and I, because we've gone from hotspot to hotspot, we are great believers in masks, and we wear them everywhere. You do have to wear a mask on public transportation in Switzerland, but that's really about the only. Children are going back to school. Sophie's sister and brother-in-law are pianists, and they teach in Basel, and they're teaching on grand pianos. They teach young children, and they have a partition between the two pianos. They can't spray down the keys between each student because it'll destroy the keys. So the children they march the children to a sink with soap and water, and they wash their hands thoroughly, and they're masked for their lessons. But there's no air conditioning, in Switzerland, because they didn't used to need it. They need it now. It's, I think, 88 degrees today and very, very humid. I know that doesn't sound like much to New Yorkers right now, but just the Swiss, it's pretty darn hot. And they can't close their windows and have a fan because of the particles. They have to leave the windows open, and they can't have fans. So poor Suzanne and Andre are melting in their music rooms in Basel right now. But it feels very normal here right now. But for the masks on public transportation, but it's not.
What has?
I've been so proud of New York. When I was in Tennessee, and of course it's an incredibly red state, and the whole mask issue of being, a God-given right not to have to wear a mask. And I would tell everyone in Tennessee, do you understand that New Yorkers have been wearing masks now for 5 months, and nobody likes it? But people man up and woman up and child up, and they fucking wear their masks, and the numbers have gotten so high in my beautiful little hometown of Paris, Tennessee, that finally they've mandated masks. And they started a whole campaign. They have masks that have Henry County written across them, and, the silhouette of the courthouse and the high school football team, and they're doing everything they can. They have one mask that just has the outline of Henry County, and it just says home. They're doing everything they can to get people to wear masks, and it is a law right now. So hopefully the numbers are going to start coming down, because when we left, I know this doesn't sound like much to New Yorkers, but my county is 30,000, my town is 10,000. And when we left July 12th, there were 65 cases, and last night there were 300. Yeah. And that's going to just keep going up and up and up until the mandated masks start to bring it down.
So much has happened during this pandemic, with people speaking out for injustices and everything. I mean, all these important issues coming to the forefront. I want to ask you about this election this November. Would you just talk about how important this election is going to be and why people should register and vote?
Well, we had talked a little bit earlier about the fact that I can't believe that anyone needs to be told to vote at this point. But we know a lot of people who say, well, I'm just not political, and I don't care, or my vote won't make a difference. And I believe it was Lincoln who said, if you want to predict the future, choose it. And we were talking earlier about the fact that I do believe that the most significant election of our lifetime was 3 years and 3/4 ago. But here we are again, and we've got a new most significant election in our lifetime. And if we want to preserve democracy, we all have to vote, and we all have to vote for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And apparently Kamala Harris now.
What has amazed you the most, and what has frustrated you the most during this pandemic?
Oh, this is only an hour show. Well, Trump and misinformation, but the internet and misinformation. The fact that Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity have the highest rated shows, not on cable television, on all network shows in that time slot. So the amount of misinformation that people are getting every minute, I saw that a QAnon the candidate in, I believe, Georgia, won in her primary yesterday. And it's terrifying to think that we have become a country that I don't know, the division of this country is what, Richie, it's so hard to even begin with what frustrates me the most about, but the one thing that I hope will change, and I don't know how it happens, because we are so polarized, but that America finally takes responsibility, white America, for the, I heard John Oliver say recently that if you want to have a conversation about how did we get here, you first have to understand that we got here on purpose, that it has been systematic racism from the beginning of this nation, and that it also ratcheted up in the 1920s and became even more horrific, if you can even imagine such a thing. And I say that only because a promise had been made to a people that had been so brutally abused for 250, 300 years. And then suddenly to have this, I mean, all these Confederate statues, like the one in my hometown, all of those, you know, popped up in the 1920s. And you know, and Jim Crow, and we are all, I've had conversations with childhood friends who absolutely, white childhood friends who absolutely believe that they have no privilege as a white person. And these are not, these are people, some of them are physicians. You know, they're educated people who deal with everyone, you know, in their communities. They're not just, I just don't, and I accept my white privilege because I know I've had this amazing career. And part of the reason why I've had this amazing career is because someone else who was Black didn't have the opportunities I had. And it's not that I feel guilty about it. Guilt does no good. Guilt is just, it again goes back to yourself. You know, it's just, I've got to make sure I can do everything I can to change it. We had a rally in my hometown after George Floyd's death, and it was maybe 3 nights after the worst of the looting, when the crazy people continued and the poor protesters were trying to stop them. And we started a few days before, a bunch of people in town, probably a fifth Black, 4/5 white, which is about the demographics of my hometown, marching around the courthouse at the intersection of the main roads with signs. In fact, a little girl went viral with her sign. I'll send you the picture. But most everyone who passed by, even men in semi-trucks, long haulers going by, honking and cheering and waving, and it surprised all of us because we didn't know what to expect. You know, it's a Trump county, and then a few nights after that, there was a rally where these 2 wonderful young activists in my hometown, who, by the way, I always mispronounce his name, James Manow, just won as a road commissioner It was one of the seats that was up, and he ran and he won. And he and his wife have such a strong get out the vote presence in my hometown right now. But at this rally, we had been told a few days before by Reverend Andre, who is a wonderful minister in our hometown. He brought everyone who didn't have one a mask. This is long before they were mandated in my hometown. Brought these masks in individual baggies. And he said, now I want you all to wear these masks to protect yourself, to protect others first, and for the optics. He said, everyone must have on a mask. And he said, and if people come up, anti-demonstrators, protesters, and try to engage, bless them with love, do not engage, and do not take it personally. So when we arrived at the rally a few nights later on the steps of the courthouse with the Confederate statue only a few yards away, he told the crowd the same thing he had said to us the days before when we were just marching with the signs. And then a few more people came, and he said, I just want to tell you all, now that most of the crowd is here, what's going on. There's some men who've arrived on the other side of the courthouse, who've gotten out of their cars in tactical gear, and they have AR-15s, white men. Well, my knees went weak. And I turned around, and Sophie, my wife, was standing behind me, and we had on our masks. I saw her eyes get really big, and I was afraid she was going to say, let's go home. What she said was, let's make a plan of where we'll meet if we have to run for our lives, And he said, but just keep your eyes open, and because he's a Baptist minister, he said, he's got us. And so we marched around the courthouse lawn, around the square, and when we got around to where the men with the AR-15s were supposed to be, our eyes were this big, and we didn't see anybody. And we came around to the front of the courthouse, and Reverend Andre was talking to these two young men in these sort of militaristic baseball caps and their wraparound sunglasses on top of the baseball caps and sort of military garb on. And, their gaiters around their necks and all of that. And he got back up to speak, and he said, while you all were marching around the courthouse, I went over and investigated. And he said, now I'm not going to make you young men say your full name, but what are your names? And one said Bryce, and one said Tyler, I think. And he said, now Bryce and Tyler have told me that they have come here to protect us. And he said, their testimony to me, which I love because it was both biblical and legal, their testimony to me is that they came to protect us. And he said, now, if any of you they graduated from high school in 2016. And he said, now, if any of y'all know these boys, I wish you would come and tell me so we can trust them. And then he said, and we appreciate you coming to protect us, but we are protected by a higher power. And then he said, and what you have to understand is when two white men get out of a car in tactical gear with AR-15s at an event like this, it makes people kind of nervous. Well, of course, those guys weren't there to protect us. They were there. Later, someone told me that they said they were there to defend the Second Amendment, and I'm sure to defend the Confederate statue and to keep, the windows from being broken. And they got there and they saw mostly 4/5 white people, many of us with white hair, and 1/5 black people. And they probably just felt stupid. I hope they did. But anyway, nothing happened. But when you see two 21-year-olds with AR-15s, it's a pretty terrifying sight.
Yeah.
But Reverend Andre handled it so well.
I just love that so many people are coming out now and standing up for what is right. So I just hope everybody comes out in November. Cherry, thank you for sharing those stories. They mean the world to everybody watching.
Well, may I tell you one more quick one?
Yeah, sure.
My sister and a dear friend of hers, Tony Kendall, who's a school teacher, a black friend and a white friend since second grade. And they started these evenings under a big old pine tree where our grade school used to be, for people to come and talk the hard talk. White people, black people coming underneath that old pine tree and not talking about the weather, but talking the hard talk. And they've been doing it every Friday night since, I guess, mid-June. And it's continued. And it's not a big group, but it's become almost group therapy sessions. For one thing, I think white people in my town understand a little better why black people in our town have hypertension because of the stress, the anger, the fear, the nonstop knee on the neck of our society. So it's been a wonderful thing. I was there I got to be there for 2 nights, and I wish every town in America could be doing that once a week.
Well, I hope that everybody who's
And I'll
watching
stop.
this, no, I love that. I hope that everybody in their towns or in their cities watches this and someone can set these all up, because every voice turns into another voice, which turns into a group, which then
Yeah.
can make a change. So
Yeah.
that's
And
great.
I think Susan got this from a CBS, maybe
Yeah.
Sunday morning program called Black, White, and Paisley of 2 friends who had started. They had a cooler of beer, but because we're a pretty Bible Belt town, it's a cooler of Coca-Colas and Fantas and Mountain Dew.
Love it. You know, I also want to congratulate you on your latest Emmy nomination for your stunning portrayal of Nan Pierce on the hit HBO series Succession. I mean, you got to work with an incredible group of actors, including incredible actresses. How
Oh my.
cool is that? I mean, J. Smith Cameron, Holly Hunter. What is that like?
Well, in the first place, Jay and I have known each other for many years. We did a couple of plays together. Our Country's Good in 1991 or something, and a Paula Vogel play at Circle Rep a few years after that, and Holly was a couple of years behind me at Carnegie Mellon in college, so I've known her since she was a freshman in college, and I'd never gotten to work with Holly, so to be with the 2 of them, and then the rest of that cast, which is just, you know, and they make it so fun, and they, I mean, they're such a tight unit, but they welcome everyone. And of course, our little group, the Pierces, for those who don't know the show or didn't see that episode, it's called Turn Haven. And it's when the wealthy Murdoch family comes to another big liberal media family, wanting to buy the liberal media, because liberal media has been bleeding quarterly, and they need the money to continue, and they need the promises from the Murdoch family that they will have editorial control of their news. Good luck with that. But anyway, there were 8 Pierces, my family, and the 8 Roys and their counselors. And so we were all together in the green room, and it was Mark Lynn Baker and Peter Friedman and Jeremy Shamos and I can't remember everybody right at this very minute, but it was just heaven to be with them and to watch how each one of them, Jeremy Strong is just unbelievable on that show, and and intense. He was so charming and kind to me. But you watch him work, he is intense. And then Sarah Snook, and it's not Snook. I know I mispronounce it. It looks like it should be Snook, but it's not Snook, and I can't think. It's not Snook. She'll forgive me. But and then Kieran and Alan Ruck, they're just all, and I got to be around Nick Braun a little bit. He wasn't in the Turnhaven one, but oh my gosh, is he delicious or what? And Jay just blows my mind. She just blows my mind on that show. Her every expression is always the perfect button to whatever the moment is. Like she never misses. And then Holly was so deliciously devious and screwing me over.
They were like a big repertory company, this cast, wasn't it? Reminded you like you'd work on stage with a group like this, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they are. And the writing feels like that. And the, you know, the direction and the DPs and the everything about it feels like a repertory theater. And to have Frank Rich there, you know, because I mean, Holly and Jay and I were, you know, laughing about how he used to, you know, strike the thunderbolt of fear in us. And now he's just the most, you know, he's just delicious and delightful. And I think that he was my champion. I think that's how I got the job. And he said to me, I wrote him when I read the script, and I said, I know Nan Pierce isn't a Katharine Graham from the Washington Post, but I think she wants to be. And he said, yeah, she's no Katharine Graham. She's a bus and truck Katharine Graham. So that gave me a big clue.
I love it. For those who may not know, Frank Rich, of course, was the theater critic for the New York Times, and now he's the executive producer. He wears a big hat on this show, Succession.
Yes, he does. Executive producer, as he was on Veep.
Yeah.
And we know about his intelligentsia columns, and he was an amazing op-ed writer for the New York Times for many years. I miss him. I miss those op-eds on that page every day.
Yeah. One of the smartest men in the room, Frank Rich.
Yep.
I want to mention one name that you got to work with on Succession, Brian Cox.
Oh, did I leave Brian Cox out? We got along really well, I have to say. He, you know, he is the old lion of that group. And he's so much fun, but you feel the young people always defer a bit to Brian, and to listen to his stories about teaching acting in Moscow. I think he taught at did he teach at the Moscow Arts? I can't remember now, but and get this, my last day on the show, we were shooting up in the Adirondacks. That's the other thing about that show. The locations are pretty swell. And I got to do 2 episodes. This was the second episode. And I came down for breakfast, and he was coming down for breakfast. And he had this look of wonder on his face. And he said, the most remarkable thing has just happened. I said, what, Brian? And he said, my agent just called, and apparently Her Majesty the Queen has requested that I read Churchill's famous speech, we will defeat them on the beaches, we will defeat them in the air, for D-Day last summer. While they were shooting, they happened to be shooting in England and in Scotland. So he got to have the day off to go to, was it Portsmouth? For the D-Day celebrations and read that. So he was beside himself. He is, oh, he's delicious.
Yeah. He sat with me when he was on Broadway the last time, like you had when you were doing your 2.5, hour Glass Menagerie. He was doing his 2.5-hour tour de force on stage. He literally sat with me for 90 minutes, then went home, took a nap, and went to the theater.
He's a pro,
Yeah,
man.
he's one of the greatest. You know,
Yeah.
you
And what
won
a
your,
gorgeous, what a gorgeous voice.
oh,
Just his voice. Could just listen to him forever.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you won your first Tony Award for The Heiress, your glorious performance as Catherine. What did that role and that show mean to you, Cherry?
Um, well, it was the first time Jerry Gutierrez, who directed The Heiress, was so because he had been an actor. Every single person in that show, he had called and said, "I want you to do this part." And but when I got offered the role, I there was a young assistant in the office, in the agent's office, and she called and told me that they wanted me to read for a role in this play, The Heiress, which I did not know, for Aunt Penniman. And I started reading it and thinking, and I was 38 or 39, and I remember thinking, oh, really? Already? I knew it would go fast, but I didn't think I was to the Aunt Penniman age range, you know. And then, but as I read it, I thought, oh my God, whoever gets to play this Catherine Sloper part, oh, they're just gonna have the best time of their lives, because I could feel the way she breathed and how she carried herself just on the page. It was just all right there. And then the young agent called back and said, I'm sorry, they want you to read for Catherine. And I just about fainted. I was so excited. And then, and it was Lincoln Center, which was, you know, the biggest thing. And then she called back and she said, I'm so sorry. You don't have to read. It's an offer. I could have just died right then and there. I was so thrilled. And then I'd never worked at Lincoln Center before. I've only gotten to work there twice. I always remind the powers that be there that I would love to do it one more time before I'm dead. But it was to be with that group of people and to have that long a run. We ran from, I think we previewed in March and we closed New Year's Eve. So we started basically from the first day of rehearsal to the day we closed. It was a year. I never missed a show. I never took a vacation because I knew it would be kind of hard coming back after a vacation to just swing back into Catherine. But that was a wonderful experience. It wasn't the role. I have a few other roles that are my favorite, but it was a glorious production to be part of. And people still come up to me and talk about that. They always talk about my coming down the stairs, which pleases me. And I always say, were you 12? And often they say, I was. Of course, they're in their 40s now.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you won your Tony Award, I think in your speech that night, you thanked three people from your beginnings. I mean, I know your family were big supporters of your career from Paris, Texas, but you thanked
Tennessee.
from Tennessee, you thanked Thelma Cherry, Miss Ruby Kreider, and Colleen Dewhurst. What did those three people mean to you?
Well, my grandmother always wanted me to be an actress, always. She was a wonderful pianist, and I think she'd always wanted my mother, who had a gorgeous contralto voice, to be an opera singer. And mother wanted to teach English and American literature in high school, so that was out. So I was her next little, as she would say, you're going to be my career girl. Yeah. And she wasn't a stage grandmother. We lived in Paris, Tennessee. She didn't take me to Nashville and try to get me on commercials, but she just always encouraged me. And I loved it. I didn't need a lot of encouragement, but she gave it to me. And she gave me confidence, you know. And then Miss Ruby Kreider was this creative dramatics teacher in my hometown that I got to take classes with after she'd retired from teaching at the high school. And she too, she introduced me to, using one's imagination in a productive way when it comes to working as an actor. And then the second time I won a Tony, I thanked my high school English teacher, Linda Wilson Miller, who gave of her time. I don't know how she had a moment to breathe. She was always with us. We were always in her living room practicing for the speech tournaments that we seemed to go to every weekend of my high school years, directing 2 or 3 plays a year. And she was very low key and had wonderful sense of humor, but was almost a little reserved, but she knew exactly how to encourage you. And she knew, and those speech tournaments were so important. I honestly think I got more out of those speech tournaments than I did college, because every time you would get to the quarterfinals, you got to do it again and refine your little piece. And then you get to the semifinals, you got to do it again and make it better. And then you get to finals, and it wasn't so much for me about winning. It was just getting an opportunity to go in front of those people and do it one more time and get a chance to make it a little better. So it was really important. And then Colleen Dewhurst, I saw when I was 16 in A Moon for the Misbegotten. That's why I never wanted to do A Moon for the Misbegotten, because when you have that in your head and it's had that kind of impact on your life, it's and I had a hard time. I did that on Broadway with Gabriel Byrne and Roy Dotrice, and it was a very difficult period for me. And when I would be cradling Gabriel Byrne with his head against my birdseed breasts, I had a little enhancement for my bosom. He rested against my birdseed, and I would cradle him, between my legs, and he falls asleep, and I look up at the moon, and I would be often in such agony because I didn't feel like I was getting it, and I would see Colleen's face in the moon. She was the moon for me. And she, with that big set of teeth, she would just sort of wink at me and she'd say, "You got it, kid, you got it." And she'd get me through it.
Well, I'll tell you, I saw her on stage, one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen. And I've seen you on stage and many others. You were one of my favorites too, just so you know. You might have looked up at that moon, but boy, she gave it right back to you because you were phenomenal in that, just so you know.
You're a very kind man, Richie Ridge. And I appreciate it.
Well, I'll tell you, you won your second Tony Award for Doubt, Sister Aloysius. What a stern, strong woman in John Patrick Shanley's play Doubt. Did director Doug Hughes give you the play?
I think they had done a reading with 3 other actresses. And I think I might know who 1 or 2 of them are, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
And, but they, for whatever reason, they passed. I'm so glad they did. Boy, some of the best parts I've ever gotten is because somebody passed. That's how we get them. And it was because Doug Hughes understood that play and understood that part so well that I felt as comfortable as I did in that role. And he used to. He turned me into this granite monolith, and I kept saying, "It's called doubt. There should be doubt." I said, I'm so awful. And Brian is such a little ray of sunshine. Nobody's going to believe me. They're all going to believe him. And he said, "No, the more certain you are, a lot of people are going to believe you." And he was, he was right. And we would have these talkbacks afterwards, especially at Manhattan Theater Club, where we started downstairs at City Center. And people would be next to their partners, and at the end of the show, the husband would assume the wife had seen the same show he'd seen, and vice versa, and they were completely at odds. I mean, people, I'm not saying they got into fistfights, but people in those talkbacks would get so angry with each other because they so strongly disagreed about the outcome or what they believed was true, and with, of course, no hard evidence. It was so fascinating. that play was so much fun because 5 minutes in, that audience was like, you felt the whole audience just sit up, and Doug knew it had to move like a bat out of hell. 90 minutes in, out. And the hardest part for me was just the opening, those first 14 minutes. And after that, it was just so much fun playing with Brian O'Byrne.
Just
And
brilliant.
Chris McGarry on the tour. We took it on tour, and Chris McGarry played the priest on tour, and Heather Golden Hirsch, and Lisa Joyce, and Adrienne Lennox, and Caroline Clay. And in a way, I may get in trouble for saying this, but in a way, the play, I think, works better than the film does because it's a powder keg.
Yeah.
You've got 4 characters. You never see a child. It's just these 4 characters in this room, and it flies by. So I think it's a play that I hope it's still being done a lot. I think it will be.
Yeah. You were talking about you only worked at Lincoln Center twice. The second time you worked was in Tina Howe's play Pride's Crossing. And I believe that Mabel Tidings Bigelow, the swimmer, is she still your favorite stage role that you played?
She is. I loved playing Viola in a production that Andre Serban directed at the American Repertory Theater in Cambridge. That's when I finally felt at 33 I could hang out my shingle as an actor. But Mabel, I loved Mabel.
Yeah.
I loved her, in part because I got to honor every elderly person that I had loved in my life, and to flip back and forth. Most people probably don't know that play because it's not done that much, and I think we did it in 1998. It's a beautiful, beautiful, difficult play to direct and produce. Because Tina doesn't give you any breadcrumbs of how to make it work, because you have to be 5 years old 1 minute, and then you're 91, and then you're 8, and then you're 91, and then you're 13, and then you're 91, and then all the way until you die. And Jack O'Brien, again, it's Jerry, Jack, and Doug Hughes, Andre Serban, these amazing, John Tiffany, these amazing directors that, and I'll say Lee Silverman with Our Lifespan of Effect. That was not an easy play to figure out how to make work, but Lee was, dogged in making that thing. I've gotten to work, Lisa Peterson, I've gotten to work with so many wonderful, wonderful directors and playwrights. But that Pride's Crossing was, it was an incredibly physical performance. It was a real workout, and I miss that. You don't get to do that kind of theater the older you get.
Well, you just mentioned John Tiffany. You and I spoke numerous times during your Broadway run of Tennessee Williams' masterpiece, The Glass Menagerie, and what I consider one of your career-defining performances as Amanda Wingfield. I mean, in John Tiffany's brilliant production of that show, you got to share the stage with Zachary Quinto, Celia Keenan-Bolger, Brian J. Smith. Were you nicknamed the Quartet?
What was the Unicorns? I don't know if it was the Unicorns. I'm blanking on what we were called. I think it was just Unicorns.
Okay.
We were the Unicorns. But that was just, when you're my age and working with Zach and Celia and Brian, I don't think they knew yet that kind of experience only really comes along once a decade. Now, Miss Celia Keenan-Bolger went on to immediately, it seems, to Kill a Mockingbird. So she's had a couple within that decade, but we're still very close, and Celia and I traded texts just the other day, and I dreamt about her 2 nights ago. She had this little cute short haircut, about the same cut that her little boy has right now, And I ran into her, and she was seated somewhere, and I just looked down at her and I said, "Hi, boy." Don't know why, but and she just looked up, and she still calls me mother. She'll say, I think she calls a few actresses that she's worked with mother, and I'm proud to be one of them.
That was so brilliant just to watch the four of you work with John Tiffany. So beautiful. His direction of that was just so perfect.
And
With that for day.
Mr. Crowley's set, oh my gosh, that when I realized what that black viscous water floating around these, and John never wanted anyone to touch the set but us. I mean, no crew came out during the show to change the scenery or anything. It was, and you could only get there from underneath. It was marooned. You were marooned on these platforms in this black viscous water that I think a lot of people thought was glass until the end of the play when it rippled. But it was a magical time.
Yeah. You mentioned the last time you were on Broadway, of course, was with Daniel Radcliffe and Bobby Cannavale in Lifespan of a Fact, directed by, Lee Silverman. How much fun was it sharing the stage with those two?
Oh, God. I have been damn lucky with, and to be, I keep talking about at my age, but, I'm about to be 64 years old, and to get to be with these people at that moment in their career, it's just, now, Bobby Cannavale, he's getting up there, but my God, I get, as does half the world, I think, I get videos. Bobby will just film himself walking around his house, sometimes with a shirt, sometimes without a shirt. And they are the fun. He is a prince of a man. Have you gotten to know Bobby at all?
Oh yeah. I shared some Jameson shots in the dressing room with him at your show.
He is so beloved.
Yeah.
I hope he lives to be as old as Methuselah.
Yep.
But regardless of when Bobby Cannavale goes, they're going to have to rent out a football stadium to fit in all the people who know and love him, because he's just the most remarkable, loyal, kind-hearted, sexy human being. And Rose Byrne, I think, has trained him.
And then you have Daniel.
And then Mr. Radcliffe. Do you know, I still haven't seen one frame of a Harry Potter movie. And I confess that to him, which of course he actually finds is a huge relief. And he said, I said, in my dotage, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch every one of them. He said, oh, skip the early parts. I don't know what I'm doing. He said, I was terrible. But again, almost freakishly normal, given what we saw firsthand his life is when he, would walk out that door every night, and that he would sign every single thing. But he is a little bit of the boy in the bubble, but you wouldn't know it when you're with him. He's really something.
Well, I have to move it. I have to move into TV now because we're running out of time already. Look at this.
Really? That's a problem when you talk to a Southerner.
I love it. You are known to millions of fans for your work on television. You won your first Emmy Award for playing President Allison Taylor. Because when I sat with you the last time, I said Allison Tucker. And I said today, I'm not going to make any faux pas today. And I said Paris, Texas, as opposed to Paris, Tennessee. But like I said,
you would say President Sophie Tucker.
Thank you. That's what you'll play in the musical. But you won your first Emmy for playing President Allison Taylor in 24. What did that role in that show mean to you, Cherry?
Honestly, the remarkable thing about that role, besides the fact of getting to, have your Oval Office, which was pretty amazing, and that the fact that the crew sort of, again, defers to you because you're the president. They gave me that confidence. But the miracle of that show was it allowed me to spend a great deal of time with my parents the last 3 years of their lives. They died 3 months apart. And thanks to that show, I was able to be home 2 weeks every month of the last 3 weeks of their lives. And I mean, last 3 years of their lives. And when my mother had her first big stroke, the writer's strike began. So I got to be home with her for months, thanks to the writer's strike. And then she had a second stroke, and I had just finished my block of work, and we had been the first to shut 2 episodes at a time. And Kiefer had to have some minor surgery, but it was going to take him 3 weeks to recover, and then they had 2 more weeks to shoot, and I was already finished. So I got to go home, and Mother died a couple of weeks later, and I was there with her that whole time and that whole passage, and a week after the funeral with my sister. It was 24 to me is a miracle for that reason. And I will always be grateful to those people for hiring me. And the only reason why I got that job was because I played Sister Aloysius. And that's the truth. I got hired right after I finished the national tour of that play, because they figured it was just a lateral move from Sister Aloysius to the President of the United States.
Makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
Now, you won your second Emmy Award last year for playing Holly, the mother to June, Elizabeth Moss's character on The Handmaid's Tale. Elizabeth Moss, you were her dream choice to play her mom, right?
Well, so she said. And I, my God, is she brilliant on that show. I don't know how she does it. And I'm so interested to see where they go with this next season. I'm curious to know if it's the final season or not. I don't know. I don't know if I'll be used or not, but I just, honestly, I'd had trouble with the level of violence in the second season. I don't think I'm talking out of school here to say that. I think a lot of people did. But given where we've gone in the last 3 years, I'm rooting for their season 4, and I'm rooting for June, and I'm back on board. And at the end of 3, she is now beginning to be in control herself as a guerrilla fighter. So I think we need all the, I don't know how to say what I'm thinking, but we need outlets for our anger and frustration. We need creative outlets for it. And Handmaid's Tale is a great way to vent that frustration.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put.
Well, but you got the gist.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned that you got 24 from a stage role, of course, of playing Sister Aloysius. Didn't Robert Redford give you your first job in films because he saw you on stage?
He actually, my first film job was in a Paul Schrader film called Light of Day with Jenna Rollins and Michael J. Fox and Joan Jett and Michael McKean and Jason Miller, all these amazing actors. I had this little bitty part where I'm known for having said, "Chicken lady's here," but that was, so Paul Schrader gave me my first part. But then Robert Redford, yeah, he'd seen The Heiress and thought from seeing me in The Heiress, I'd be perfect to play a veterinarian in The Horse Whisperer.
I love it how he saw you playing that kind of role into that and saying she'd be perfect.
What he didn't know was that I was hideously allergic to horses. Hideously allergic to horses. I was on so many drugs when I was playing that vet.
I have to ask you also about Tim Robbins, because you did The Cradle Will Rock with him. And I know, did he not write you an incredibly long monologue that he said, we're going to shoot like right after you have a sandwich or something right after lunch?
Well, he was looking at the actual testimony of my character. You know, it was a real character, Hallie
Yeah.
Flanagan, who's the head of the Federal Theater Project, and he all of her testimony. They've been, you know, calling her a communist, and for months they've been taking testimony, and they only gave her a few hours to answer these ridiculous charges. And all of her answers were long, detailed, you know, just beautifully articulate answers to these idiot senators or congressmen. I can't remember which, and I guess congressman. And he, as long as he had everyone in the room, there was just one more long, incredibly difficult paragraph, and I mean, you know, single spaced like that, very involved, that he decided he just had to get. And he handed it to me at lunch and said, "We'll shoot it after lunch." I'm looking at him thinking, "You're an actor. You are a fucking actor. How could you do this to me?" And I couldn't put it in front of me and read it because she's speaking extemporaneously. She's not reading from anything. So I kind of half-assed got through with, I was proud of myself. I actually made sense. And of course, it didn't make the cut because it was too long. He had too much of it. But anyway.
I just love that story. Yeah.
I saw that film again recently. I hadn't seen it since I first saw it when it came out. And I liked it the first time I saw it, but boy, I really loved it the second time I saw it. It's so good. And a lot of students see that film. Yeah.
It's a great actor's film. It's a great film just to watch. And knowing these backstories of how it was done, how quickly it was done, and like those kind of stories are really great. Well, like I said, we're just about out of time, but there are so many other things like Transparent, another incredible series you did where you play Leslie Macklow. How incredible was that?
It was it made me blush. I had to kiss and be kind of a sexual predator with younger women, and I always thought I was, you know, a kind of a big boned lesbian. But until I played Leslie, I realized I'm just a girl. I had to really butch up for Leslie, and it was fun. Yeah. And my wife liked it too.
Great role. Well, you know, Cherry, my final question for you is, what have you learned the most about yourself during this shutdown, during this quarantine?
I have learned, I developed an even deeper, almost painful love and longing for family, and just need to be with family as much as possible. I've learned I'm too easily distracted. I've learned that if you make enough potholders, you can actually get tired of making potholders. That really is therapy for me. I hate to admit it. And it also keeps me from smoking too much because and I've got to stop. You'd think 64 would be enough. Now, there are going to be lots of comments about that. I'm going to get lots of notes from friends saying, "You're still smoking?" But I've learned the importance of hope, I think, because I read a lot, and I read very diverse things. I don't just read liberal, I read conservative, and I get very doom and gloomy because I know how difficult the years are going to be ahead of us. And I get overwhelmed by that. And I'm learning the necessity for hope and action in a way that I've not known it before. And not like this. Yeah.
Well, what I love about you the most is that you are still that same little girl from Paris, Tennessee. Everybody who knows you said she has never changed. I mean, I know Larry and David and Jay David and all the people you know from there, and they said she has never changed.
Well, I wouldn't know how.
Well, listen, I thank you for joining me from Switzerland. This has meant the world to me and to your fan base and just everybody watching here at Broadway World. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I have known you since your Broadway debut in Stepping Out for Tommy
Oh
Tune.
my gosh. And Richie, you must have been 12. You
I
gotta
was,
tell me.
I think I was 14.
Were you?
No, who knows? I'm trying to think, but I was.
Believe you'd already have your own show at 14.
I should have had yeah. I think I was about that, but I know Tommy Tune said, I think I taught her to tap dance, right?
He did.
Well, listen, Send My Life to Sophie. Like I said, her documentary on the Blue Note record label is incredible. I've been watching interviews on her. Enjoy the rest of your stay there. And I cannot wait to hug you because you know I'm a hugger when we get back here to New York, when the theater opens up and is bigger and better than ever. I adore you. Everybody stay safe and we'll see you soon.
All right, Richard. Love to everybody back home. Can't wait to be back.